I am a chubby princess weighing 200 pounds, while my best friend is renowned as the most beautiful woman in the capital. She imparts to me the knowledge of aesthetics. The lighter the color of the dress, the more subtle the makeup. It is in such attire that I shall appear most exquisite. I believed her. Just as I was preparing to don such an ensemble for the banquet, a sudden epiphany struck me regarding the narrative. It turns out I am merely a stepping stone, a secondary character in a time-traveling tale. As the confidant of the time-traveling heroine, it is my duty to accentuate her beauty, making her more radiant than blossoms, and to bolster her presence with warmth and support. Once my prospective prince becomes enamored with the time-traveling girl, I shall be sacrificed by the plot, making room for her. I am incensed. What of this time-traveling girl? They can all go to the side. Until every ounce of my potential is exhausted, I shall not be deemed a princess in vain. 1. Next month marks the Blossom Festival, and Hu Qianqian has invited me to select a gown for the banquet at the fabric shop. The fabrics she has chosen for me are all in understated hues, complemented by an equally delicate makeup. In Hu Qianqian's words, this is referred to as an air of sophistication. She holds a piece of moon-white satin before me, beaming with delight. Sister, think about it. The scenes in those tales often depict the female lead, who once favored vibrant reds and greens, having her beauty squandered. Yet one day, she begins to don simple garments, and everyone suddenly recognizes her beauty. I find her reasoning quite compelling. It is not merely because I agree with her, rather, there exists a peculiar energy within Hu Qianqian that compels me to believe in her. Hu Qianqian has a penchant for plain clothing. She is renowned as the most beautiful maiden in the capital, possessing skin as delicate as ice and bones as fine as jade. And the snow blue gown she wears accentuates her slender form, evoking a sense of tenderness within me. With such beauty and kindness, I cannot help but trust her judgment. Just as I was about to pay, however, the shopkeeper's daughter suddenly stopped me. Miss, you are rather plump. You shouldn't wear light colors, lest you resemble the large steamed bun that Ao had for breakfast. The shopkeeper shot Ao a glare, and just as he was about to apologize, Hu Qianqian preemptively chastised. How dare you show such disrespect to Her Highness the Princess? A princess of noble birth, how can you presume to comment on her? I couldn't help but frown. I was not angry, yet Hu Qianqian's words seemed to imply my own arrogance as a princess. As this thought crossed my mind, a sudden pain surged through my head, and guilt flooded my heart. How could I entertain such a notion? Hu Qianqian is my dearest friend. She must be acting out of concern for me. The shopkeeper, intimidated by Hu Qianqian's words, fell to his knees. Your Highness, please spare my life. Before I could urge him to rise, a voice of reprimand pierced the air. Princess Baowa, what are you doing? It was Pei Yi, the man I yearn for but cannot have. Pei Yi coldly stated. The princess enjoys the support of the people, yet you wield your power oppressively, utterly unworthy of your royal status. Hearing Pei Yi speak with such disdain ignited the fury within my maid, Ting Lan, who clenched her jaw to suppress her voice. For I had forbidden her to speak. In my heart, Pei Yi had been exalted to a golden stature, leaving no room for negative remarks about him. Even if Ting Lan felt indignant, she could only swallow her words of reproach. Observing Pei Yi's cold glare directed at me, Hu Qianqian clung to his ample sleeve and pleaded, Brother Pei, after all, my sister is of noble birth, a precious life. It is only natural for her to possess some temper. Please do not be angry with her, all right? Hu Qianqian's patient entreaties only seemed to render Pei Yi's gaze toward me increasingly frigid, particularly upon hearing noble birth and precious life. Whereupon a hint of derision flickered across his face. I stepped forward in haste, wishing to explain to Pei Yi that I bore no resentment toward the shopkeeper and her daughter. Yet, just as my fingers brushed against the fabric of his robe, he instinctively shoved me away. Your Highness, Ting Lan exclaimed, quickly steadying me, while Pei Yi remained unmoved. My head throbbed painfully, not merely from Pei Yi's indifference, but from an influx of bizarre narrative threads flooding my mind. It dawned on me that this realm was the setting of a tale named Phoenix's Song in the Sky. With Hu Qianqian as the chosen heroine, the narrative unfolds the story of a girl from another world, endowed with a fortune system, who seizes the identity of Hu Qianqian, the capital's most beautiful maiden, as she navigates familial strife, forges poetry, befriends royal elites, and falls in love with the downcast gentleman Pei Yi. I am merely the bridge for Hu Qianqian to connect with the nobility. As the daughter of a merchant, Hu Qianqian's rise to prominence is facilitated by my friendship, and once she secures her footing, I am destined to perish from complications stemming from my obesity, allowing her to enjoy a blissful life with Pei Yi.
2.
I felt as if I were a traveler shrouded in mist, suddenly piercing through the veil that enveloped me, finding explanations for all previous absurdities. I realized with shocking clarity that Hu Qianqian was no longer my friend, but rather a harbinger of doom. With a steely resolve, I prepared to return to the palace and arrange for Hu Qianqian's departure from this world. Yet, as soon as this thought emerged, a wave of intense palpitations gripped my heart. It was as if a hand named Death had seized my heart. It felt as though the very rules of this world conspired to protect Hu Qianqian. Should I threaten her life, the impending terror would recoil upon me first. Observing my pale complexion, Hu Qianqian offered me a gentle smile, filled with understanding. "Sister, you seem rather frail. A gust of wind might topple you. You must eat more and nourish yourself." When she uttered these words, her large almond-shaped eyes sparkled with sincerity. However, Pei Yi looked at me, who was whiter than two Hu Qianqians combined, with a glimmer of disdain in his gaze. In truth, I had not always been this large. In the past, I could have been described as having a face like a silver basin, round and lustrous, possessing a beauty of fullness. Yet, since befriending Hu Qianqian, my body had swelled as if inflated. Even taking a few steps now left me breathless. Yet she often insisted that I looked more beautiful in my current state. Ultimately, she would counsel me, saying that as a princess, I should not be defined by my weight, nor should I be influenced by the opinions of others. Although her arguments were riddled with inconsistencies, Hu Qianqian possessed a certain charm that made it difficult to resist believing her. Hu Qianqian playfully shook my arm, her brow arched in a gentle plea. "Sister, let us let the shopkeeper's daughter off with a light punishment for today. After all, Ah is still quite young. Please don't hold it against her, will you?" On the surface, she appeared to be concerned about me punishing the shopkeeper, thus proposing a lenient reprimand, high-handedly lifting the burden before gently setting it down. In the past, I would have interpreted this as her goodwill, effectively allowing me to vent my non-existent grievances without tarnishing my reputation as a harsh merchant. However, upon awakening to the narrative, I understood that she had no regard for me at all. She merely used me as a vessel to elevate herself. Pei Yi grasped the underlying meaning of Hu Qianqian's words, casting an appreciative glance in her direction. The two exchanged knowing smiles, a perfect harmony as if everything were understood without words. The shopkeeper regarded Hu Qianqian with gratitude, profusely thanking her for her benevolence, entirely forgetting that it was she who had initially accused Ao of great disrespect. Noticing my prolonged silence, a flicker of unnoticeable delight crossed Hu Qianqian's features. She frowned slightly, disapprovingly stating, "Sister, children often speak without malice. Besides, Ao acted without intent. Must you truly hold a grudge against a child?" Upon speaking, I seemed to catch a fleeting glimmer of golden light surrounding her. Simultaneously, an unfamiliar, strange sound echoed from Hu Qianqian. Ding! The host displays righteousness and compassion, earning 5 fortune points. Acquired title The Only Pure White Jasmine. Wearing this title increases NPC's unconditional trust in you by 20. Could this be the system spoken of in the narrative, Hu Qianqian's greatest reliance? I had no understanding of why I suddenly awakened to the plot, nor why I could hear the voice of the system. In the face of this upheaval, I clenched my fingers until the pain in my palms subdued my frantic heartbeat, restoring clarity to my thoughts. Having remained silent for too long, I left Hu Qianqian, adorned with her halo of benevolence, waiting in vain. Pei Yi's expression darkened, ready to interject, but I interrupted. "I am the youngest daughter of the emperor. When did I acquire an unrelated sister?" Hu Qianqian looked at me, puzzled. "Once." I treated her with genuine sincerity, engaging in an equal friendship without ever adopting a princess's airs. Yet, I turned my gaze away from her and addressed the monk, saying, "Please rise, the ground is cold." The monk, initially kneeling in the direction of Hu Qianqian, suddenly seemed to awaken to my presence and bowed 3 times to me. I instructed Tinglan to assist her up and plucked a golden hairpin from my own coiffure, presenting it to Ao. Those who dare to confront me shall be rewarded.
Oh,
You have acted rightly. This hairpin, crafted from pure gold and adorned with 7 shades of gradient tourmaline, was of considerable worth. A ripple seemed to disturb the golden aura surrounding Huiqianqian. A shadow, faint yet ominous, loomed over it, attempting to engulf the golden light, but the radiance resisted valiantly. I regarded Huiqianqian, a smile not quite a smile gracing my lips. Indeed, Miss Hua, when have I ever claimed they were in the wrong? Upon uttering these words, the shadow bit into the golden light, causing it to dim momentarily. In that instant, the monk, belatedly comprehending Huiqianqian's duplicity, digging a pit only to fill it again, had his expression shift dramatically, and he knelt once more, exclaiming, "The commoner thanks your highness for your great kindness." As he spoke, a peculiar voice echoed from Huiqianqian. "Warning. Host has been slapped in the face. Luck value decreases by 5, and the title The Only Pure White Jasmine is revoked." Huiqianqian's smile froze upon her face. She gracefully bowed, saying, "No, your highness. It is I, Qianqian, who has overstepped. I feared you would suffer grievances, not realizing you needed none." With this, Huiqianqian fell silent, tears cascading down her cheeks like a string of pearls, as if her heart was too burdened with injustice to voice her remaining thoughts. Pei Yi, filled with concern, softly comforted her. I could no longer discern Huiqianqian's subsequent words, only observing the expression of Pei Yi, a warmth and gentleness I had not seen in ages. Did it hurt? I pondered. Once upon a time, Pei Yi had been the boy who flew kites with me, lit lanterns, and vowed to protect me for a lifetime. Yet, everything changed with Huiqianqian's arrival. I numbly watched Pei Yi, treating her like a cherished treasure, tenderly soothing the bright moon in his heart. Strangely, I felt no bitterness, as if my long-standing infatuation and indulgence had dissipated like mist in the sunlight. The following day, my maid, Qingru, approached me with a large food box, presenting it with care. "Your Highness, Miss Hua personally cooked your favorite delicacies." Upon opening the box, it revealed a bowl brimming with sweet cakes. Huiqianqian had often delivered treats to me, which I had once relished. However, upon reflection, it was these very delicacies that had contributed to my growing weight and declining health. I fixed my gaze on Qingru. Did I not instruct you that I no longer wished to hear anything regarding Huiqianqian?
chastised.
Qingru appeared aggrieved, but this is a heartfelt offering for Miss Hua. Do you wish to disregard her intentions? What a fine sentiment to disregard Miss Hua's goodwill. I frowned. It seems I have been too lenient with you, allowing you to forget who your mistress is. Qingru, undeterred, maintained her lofty demeanor, speaking with righteous fervor. Your Highness, you wronged Qingru. She merely wishes to see you and those who truly care for you remain united. I sighed. Qingru has overstepped. Take her away, deliver 10 strikes to her palms, and dismiss her from her position. Tinglan complied, while the other servants trembled in fear. For Qingru had once been my favored maid. Yet, Qingru remained obstinate. Your Highness, even if you punish me, I must speak. How can you treat Miss Hua in such a manner when she is your closest friend? Though Qingru was my maid, her heart belonged entirely to Huiqianqian, and she later followed her into marriage. After my demise due to obesity, Pei Yi unexpectedly became steadfast, vowing never to wed, earning a wave of accolades both among the populace and in court. My father, moved by Pei Yi's profound affection, could not bear to see him grow old alone, and decided to bestow a marriage upon him. Pei Yi responded that I had entrusted him with Huiqianqian's care. To fulfill my wishes, he would only marry her. As for Qingru, she became the bridge between Pei Yi, Huiqianqian, and my father, relaying their deep yearning for me and their unwavering affection, never forgetting me for a moment. As my most cherished maid, my father believed her words. Each time he listened to her recount fabricated tales, he would weep, rewarding her generously. Little did I know, I had nurtured such a treacherous servant. With a cold scoff, I quietly instructed Tinglan, convey Qingru to the Ministry of Justice. Since she is so fond of Miss Hua's cakes, let her enjoy them all from now on. The notion of Huiqianqian delivering items to Qingru was merely glossed over in the narrative. Yet, I found myself curious. How did Qingru, amidst the stringent palace regulations, manage to communicate with her? Though Qingru was stubborn, she could not withstand half an hour under the scrutiny of the Ministry of Justice's matron, quickly divulging every detail of her exchanges with Hu Qianqian. Intriguingly, despite Qingru's originally slender form, the grueling conditions of the ministry did not diminish her. Rather, she became increasingly plump after indulging in Hu Qianqian sweets. My next encounter with Hu Qianqian was during the flower festival. Considering her radiant aura, I had no desire to confront her without a well-considered strategy. However, Hu Qianqian seemed intent on provoking me. She had somehow learned of my reprimanding Qingru, indicating that Hu Qianqian's influence had permeated my surroundings. Fortunately, she was unaware of Qingru's detention, suggesting that Tinglan remained trustworthy. Under the sunlight, Hu Qianqian appeared as an embodiment of righteousness, impervious to reproach. How can you unjustly punish Qingru? Even as a princess, you cannot so callously disregard human life. With her terse words, the accusation of mistreating a servant was cast upon me. As she spoke, her entire being radiated with golden light. Influenced by her brilliance, the surrounding noble ladies and gentlemen regarded her with admiration. At that moment, 2 system notifications resonated from her. Ding! Host displays righteousness and benevolence. Luck value increases by 20. Luck value can be exchanged for items in the store. Gained title the Virtuous Lord of Clear Broth. Wearing this title increases respect from NPCs of differing factions by 20. I frowned in denial. Miss Hua, I am unaware of what nonsense you speak. Are you aware that it is a grave offense to falsely accuse the royal family? Hu Qianqian, certain I would not confess, presented an array of witnesses and evidence, thoroughly substantiating my reprimand of Qingru. I also learned of additional spies Hu Qianqian had positioned around me. Suppressing a smile, I nodded. I admit, the punishment of Qingru did indeed occur. Seeing her objective achieved, Hu Qianqian, like a loyal and valiant scholar, attempted to continue her performance of persuasion. Before she could speak, I gently interjected. However, Miss Hua, you are mistaken. Qingru is not innocent. She presented food of dubious origin to me, without prior approval from the Imperial Medical Bureau or a poison test, which raises suspicions of endangering the royal heir, an offense punishable by extermination of her family. I merely delivered 10 strikes to her palms as a minor reprimand. I fail to understand how you could label me as one who disregards human life. The crowd praised Princess Baohua for her virtue, with some expressing concern and advising that a servant like Qingru should not remain by my side. Upon hearing food of dubious origin, Hu Qianqian's expression shifted. Yet she understood that she could not reveal the cakes were her creation, lest she complicate her defense. To her surprise, this incident granted me the opportunity to enhance my reputation at her expense, yet she, ever adaptable, smiled with a twinkle in her eye, clapping her hands and exclaiming, "So that is the case. Your Highness is benevolent, and Qianqian is relieved." The young lady's smile appeared sincere, as if she genuinely cared for my reputation. I found myself no longer the gentle soul I once was, my tone sharp as I addressed her. Miss Hua, you have enlightened me, yet there remains one matter shrouded in confusion. How is it that you, so far removed from the palace, possess such intimate knowledge of my internal affairs? I fixed my gaze upon her, leaving no room for evasion. Articulating each word with precision, what is your intent in prying into my schedule and corrupting my servants, Miss Hua? Casting aspersions is a skill anyone can master, is it not? Hu Qianqian could not fathom why I pursued her relentlessly, offering no quarter. Her delicate visage paled, and she bit her lip, at a loss for words. The very individuals who had recently showered her with admiration now regarded her as a pariah, compelling her to cast a desperate glance toward Pei Yi. She was undeniably exquisite, her autumn-hued eyes glistening like dewdrops, gazing at him with a pleading innocence akin to a fledgling bird lost in a tempest, stirring the heart with a mere glance, rendering one utterly enraptured. Pei Yi, caught in the spell of her gaze, felt a surge of unguarded compassion. In a sudden outburst, he hurled the sandalwood box he had been holding to the ground with a fierce proclamation, "Jiang Baohua, do not overstep your bounds." The box struck the earth with a resounding thud, causing a collective gasp among the onlookers. As the lid flew open, a sachet embroidered with intertwined lotuses tumbled forth. 2 blooms, united in spirit, beamed at one another amidst the rippling waters. This was a token I had painstakingly stitched for Pei Yi. a heartfelt wish for our eternal bond. Fearing he would refuse my offering, I had concealed the sachet within the sandalwood box, accompanied by various gifts, and sent it to his residence. Little did I anticipate that he would reveal it in such a callous manner, exposing my sentiments for all to witness. Feigning alarm, Hu Qianqian glanced at me with calculated intent, tugging at Pei Ye's sleeve with an air of meekness. Brother Pei, the prince will be heartbroken. To mask a transgression, one must orchestrate a greater calamity. Hu Qianqian understood that Pei Yi was my Achilles heel. Once he was involved, my emotions would inevitably be swayed. No matter my grievances, I would yield for his sake. Yet now, as I no longer harbored affection for him, her ploy fell flat. The sachet and other gifts had been presented in my capacity as a princess. What was termed a gift was, in essence, a royal bestowal. Pei Ye's dismissal of my token was a matter of grave significance. To speak of disrespecting the royal family is to tread perilously close to treason. I inquired of Tinglan, what is the penalty for disrespecting the royal family? A flicker of disbelief crossed her eyes, which widened in astonishment. Upon receiving my affirming gaze, she stifled her rising emotions and replied, Your Highness, to disrespect the royal family is a capital offense. Before me, Pei had always been audacious, a sardonic smile gracing his lips. Princess Baohua, you possess quite the temper. The Pei family has held esteemed positions for generations. It cannot be that your mere words will condemn me. The sunlight traced his outline, illuminating the vigor of youth unafraid of authority, while beside him stood the enchanting maiden, her gaze shimmering like a delicate flower that seemed incapable of self-sustenance. The scene was picturesque, akin to a painting. Yet, I recognized that Pei Ye's bravado stemmed solely from his favored status. Indeed, Master Pei is well-versed in the law, I retorted with a self-deprecating smile, nodding in acknowledgement. However, according to the laws of the Great Zhou, before a trial at the Dali Temple, I am unable to bestow upon you a death sentence. He wore an expression of smug realization. Before he could revel in his triumph, I shifted my tone, yet your repeated transgressions are undeniable. Unfazed, he bore a hint of mockery, and what can you do about it? I scoffed, producing the royal decree from my sleeve. Tinglan, heed my command. Pei Yi has repeatedly offended the princess, spoken with disrespect, and shown a lack of deference. However, I am merciful, and thus, I shall administer 10 strikes as a warning to others. The disdain on Pei Ye's face turned to one of dismay upon witnessing the royal decree. Jiang Baohua, you dare. The decree signified my authoritative command as Princess Baohua, impervious to defiance. I shook my head, pitying him. Pei Yi, unyielding to discipline and obstinate, has squandered my benevolence. Very well, Tinglan, increase the punishment to 20 strikes. A servant quickly procured a suitable rod and handed it to Tinglan. She had long harbored disdain for Pei Yi. After several blows, a muffled groan escaped his throat, cold sweat beaded on his brow. In my previous infatuation, witnessing his suffering would have shattered my heart. Yet now, I felt naught but indifference, almost wishing to hasten his departure from this world. I sensed no discomfort within myself, devoid of the terror that had gripped me when contemplating harm against Hu Qianqian. Cease the punishment, Hu Qianqian cried, collapsing against Pei Yi, tears streaming down her cheeks, soaking his garments. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with accusation. Sister Princess, all the blame rests upon me. Please do not punish Brother Pei any further. If punishment is to be meted out, let it fall upon me, for I willingly offer myself in his stead. Pei furrowed his brows, growling lowly. Qianqian, you are a fool. How could I bear to let you take the blows? I sought to test the extent of the protagonist's halo and declared, one cannot substitute, but we can strike together. Hu Qianqian, frail and delicate, soon succumbed to unconsciousness. At that moment, a system notification resonated. Warning. The host has been slapped in the face. Luck value decreased by 20, title clear soup lord revoked. Upon hearing similar words and recalling my prior experience at the cloth store, realization dawned upon me. The original plot at the cloth store should have involved Ao confronting me, with Hu Qianqian intervening to rescue the matriarch, thus gaining reputation points. However, today, as Huazhao Festival narrative had Hu Qianqian stepping on me to earn her reputation for benevolence. Little did I know that I had disrupted the plot on both occasions, leading to the forfeiture of rewards. Thus, it became clear that diminishing the luck value was the key to unraveling the situation. Tinglan inquired, "Your Highness, shall we continue?" Just as I was about to say yes, an inexplicable sense of foreboding washed over me once more. I had no choice but to relent. It seemed that the protagonist's halo could not be easily dispelled. I would have to proceed with caution. Upon returning to the princess's residence, my father summoned me for questioning. I knew he had learned of my use of corporal punishment. As the youngest daughter of the emperor, I was well aware of his keen scrutiny. Despite his advancing years, my father remained vigorous and resolute. In the imperial study, he sat calmly reviewing memorials, ignoring my presence as I entered. I feigned ignorance of his cold reception, shamelessly kneeling beside him and shaking his knee. "Father." He recognized my ploy to evade questioning and paid me no mind. The familiar scent of dragon-esque saliva wafted from him, stirring a tumult of emotions within me, an amalgamation of grievance and discontent. My life felt like a farce, existing merely to serve as a wedding garment for Hui Qianqian. Since discovering the plot, an ever-looming anxiety had gnawed at me like an insatiable parasite. Initially, I had merely wished to cry for my father's sympathy, yet my tears became genuine, rendering me breathless. Seeing my distress, my father set down his brush, his voice soothing. "Who has wronged my precious daughter?" I attempted to convey the intricacies of the plot to him, but, as anticipated, the words caught in my throat. There was no shortcut to this predicament. I could not engage in actions that might directly threaten Hui Qianqian's life, for I knew it would lead to my own demise. Thus, I altered my approach. "It is Pei Yi. He has bullied me, and I wish to annul our engagement." The Pei family had once been esteemed officials of the previous dynasty, and upon their allegiance to the Great Zhou, their lives had been spared. However, the founding emperor had little regard for those of two surnames, and thus the Pei family had not been rewarded with significant power. In time, they faded into obscurity, their influence waning as the previous dynasty's power diminished. Yet, in the generation of Pei Yi, it was due to the favor I bestowed upon him that the Pei family began to rise gradually. My father did not inquire about the reasons but rather sighed, saying, "My dear, you have grown. The Pei family is indeed not a suitable match for my son." Pei Yi was publicly reprimanded by me and subsequently withdrew from our engagement, leading to widespread knowledge of his offense against the Princess Bahua, resulting in a significant decline in the Pei family's standing. However, Hui Qianqian, on the other hand, was rapidly gaining fame in the capital. The catalyst for her rise was an examination candidate who stumbled upon several manuscripts. The handwriting was rather careless, yet the verses were nothing short of timeless masterpieces. The candidate was astounded, regarding the poet as a kindred spirit, and sought to uncover the author through connections in the capital, yet the identity of the poet remained elusive. Nevertheless, those poems began to circulate widely, with the public clamoring to transcribe them, leading to a paper shortage in the capital. Amidst the chorus of anticipation, Hui Qianqian shyly made her appearance. Initially, some questioned whether she had appropriated another's verses, or if the Hui family sought to elevate her status by hiring a ghostwriter. However, when Hui Qianqian effortlessly composed a poem on the spot, all skeptics were silenced, and talented scholars genuinely bowed to her brilliance. Many of them were candidates preparing for the upcoming imperial examination, with some even being popular contenders for the top ranks. A chill ran through me. If those admirers of Hui Qianqian truly entered the court, it would be impossible to turn the tide. After careful consideration, I resolved to take the initiative with Hui Qianqian, wagering that those verses were certainly not her own creation. The culture of the Great Zhou dynasty was progressive, lacking strict gender segregation, allowing Hui Qianqian to frequently appear at various poetry gatherings to bolster her fortune. Upon my arrival at the elegant pavilion hosting the poetry meeting, I found Hui Qianqian captivating the audience with the line, "The autumn waters share the same hue as the sky. The setting sun and the solitary wild goose soar in unison." A system notification chimed from her presence. Ding. The host has gained the admiration of talented scholars. Fortune value 30. Acquired title The Poet Immortal Descends, which increases respect from NPCs of the same faction by 20. Hui Qianqian's smile froze upon seeing me. The next moment, in front of all the scholars, she knelt in a panic, saying, "Your Highness, though I do not know what I have done wrong, If I have caused you displeasure, it must certainly be my fault. Please. Her eyes brimmed with tears, resembling a delicate flower battered by a torrential downpour. Her voice quivering as she uttered, "Punish me." Hu Qianqian truly knew how to turn the tables. With just 2 sentences, she had positioned me against everyone else. The scholars, while unable to voice their anger, looked at me with fiery gazes, witnessing the poet immortal being bullied by me, the wicked princess. I suppressed my disgust and helped her up, saying, "I do not quite comprehend your words, Miss Hua. I admire your talent too much to punish you." With tears glistening in her eyes, Hu Qianqian was about to continue her performance when I interrupted her. I took my seat at the head of the table and kindly inquired, "Miss Hua, with such profound knowledge, what books do you usually read?" My intention in confronting Hu Qianqian today stemmed from the fact that many of the circulated poems were incomplete, mostly consisting of a few striking lines, akin to a student who, after years of study, could only recall fragmented phrases from their books. Seeing my earnest demeanor, Hu Qianqian furrowed her brows and racked her brain to produce a few book titles, the 4 books and 5 classics, the teachings for women. "Miss Hua, your erudition is commendable. You are being too modest." The surrounding scholars nodded in agreement, none believing that such a talented individual had only read those few books. A sense of foreboding flickered in Hu Qianqian's heart, yet she could only force a smile, replying, "Your Highness, you overpraise me. Today is a poetry gathering, and I wish to seek your wisdom." I continued, "What does the text say? Heaven's mandate is called nature, following nature is called the way. Cultivating the way is called teaching. How should one interpret this?" Hu Qianqian, she stammered for a long time, unable to respond, gazing at me with pleading eyes. "I am but a humble girl with little knowledge. I dare not show off in front of your Highness." I feigned ignorance of her embarrassment and laughed heartily. "Today we discuss knowledge, not status." She sought assistance from the scholars, but found their gazes toward me devoid of hostility. The content I probed her with was the opening line of the Doctrine of the Mean, a question even a child who had received basic education could answer. To onlookers, it appeared that I was genuinely elevating Hu Qianqian by asking such a simple question. From this day forth, she would not only wash away the stigma of antagonism with me, but also gain the endorsement of Princess Bahua's assessment. Hu Qianqian was on the verge of tears, her face as red as a ripe peach, yet others mistakenly believed she was merely shy and continued to encourage her. A youth closest to Hu Qianqian urged, "Miss Hua, this is a splendid opportunity. You must answer." Hu Qianqian, her expression revealed her desire to respond, yet she was at a loss. I, showing understanding, smiled. "Perhaps that was a bit challenging. Let me rephrase. From where does that phrase originate?" She bit her lip, saying, "I recently fell into the water and have been feeling weak. I am somewhat disoriented at the moment." Observant individuals began to sense something amiss. Her earlier poetic prowess did not align with her current feeble state. The golden light surrounding her flickered precariously, encircled by a shadowy presence. I smiled cruelly. "You, who claim to be well-versed in the 2 books of the 4 books and 5 classics, surely know that this phrase comes from the 5 classics, correct?" Hu Qianqian was truly flustered. Clinging to a lifeline, she replied, Yes, I certainly know." Once she uttered those words, the expressions of those around us shifted drastically. The 4 books and 5 classics were not merely 2 books, and the Doctrine of the Mean did not belong to the 5 classics. This was a fundamental error. Finally, I heard the sound I had been longing for from Hu Qianqian's system. Warning. The host has been slapped in the face. Fortune value -30. Title: The Poet Immortal Descends revoked. Hu Qianqian closed her eyes and collapsed to the ground. I had assumed that once Hu Qianqian's reputation among the scholars faltered, it would be difficult for her to recover. However, she proved to be far more resilient than I anticipated. She was unexpectedly summoned to the palace. My father hosted a banquet for the ministers, and Hu Qianqian, as the capital's most beautiful woman, entered the palace to perform a dance. Uniquely, she danced while writing poetry. After her performance, her poem was presented to my father. The poem was exquisitely crafted. She critiqued all the renowned benevolent emperors in our history, concluding with the lines, "Among the myriad of remarkable figures, we look to the present." This delighted my father immensely. Moved by her talent, he personally quizzed Hu Qianqian. She cast a glance at me, her eyes betraying her excitement. The next moment, the system's voice echoed. Ding! The host expended 50 fortune points to exchange for the item. Library of Books. Library of Books resides within the host's mind, a vast collection of knowledge available for immediate reference. This time, in response to my father's inquiries, Hu Qianqian answered fluently, as if her previous blunder had been a mere accident. System. Ding. The host demonstrates extensive knowledge and answers fluently in the Emperor's presence. Fortune value 100. Acquired title the Emperor's favor, which increases respect from all NPCs by 100. It was evident that my father was quite pleased with Hu Qianqian. Just as he was about to offer praise, I feigned innocence and asked Miss Hua, "How remarkable you are. Did you compose these poems just now?" Hu Qianqian, not grasping my intent, felt secure in her position and confidently replied, "In response to your highness, yes." I inwardly scoffed. That was precisely the response I sought. I turned to my father with a smile. "Father, how fortunate we are today, and with Miss Hua, such a poetic immortal at our side. Why don't we?" I paused for a moment to look at Hu Qianqian, whose eyes held a glimmer of mockery, confident that no matter what I did today, it would ultimately serve to adorn her. I gazed at her and continued, "Let us emulate the poetic societies of our ancestors, with random prompts, diverse themes, spontaneous rhymes, and varied tones, and engage in a contest." With each word I uttered, the color drained from Hu Qianqian's face until she staggered back a step. "My father, the Emperor," indulgently remarked, "Granted." I had restricted all avenues for Hu Qianqian. Though she possessed a library at her disposal, her attempts to search through it resulted in mere haphazard assemblages. Her standard plummeting. The Emperor's expression shifted slightly. Those with discerning eyes recognized that her previous fluency was not spontaneous, but rather premeditated. This constituted a grave transgression against the Emperor. Once again, I had unmasked her charade, and in her gaze directed at me, there was no longer the usual guise of a delicate flower. It was now filled with venomous hatred, raw and malicious. Yet, curiously, there was no trace of despair. A sense of dissonance surged within me. The Emperor abhorred being manipulated, yet moments ago, Hu Qianqian had nearly earned his commendation, which amounted to leveraging his authority for her own benefit. The Emperor refrained from rebuking her directly, not wishing to slap his own face. However, among the assembled ministers, who could be deemed naive, from this day forth, no one would dare to sing praises of Hu Qianqian. Why was she not despondent? Something felt amiss. It was undeniably unsettling. I had merely awakened to the narrative concerning myself. The subsequent developments involving Pei Yi and Hu Qianqian remained shrouded in mystery. Suddenly, a thunderclap resounded in my mind, and a previously overlooked detail surfaced. The title of this book is Feng Ming Jiu Shao. I had assumed this world revolved around Hu Qianqian, hence referring to her as Phoenix. Yet, the phoenix also symbolizes the Empress, who embodies maternal virtue. Was it possible that Hu Qianqian was destined to enter the palace and become one of my 3,000 consorts? The Emperor, having lost interest, departed early, and I naturally followed, not forgetting to stoke the flames. "Father, why was it that Hu Qianqian answered your earlier questions with such ease, yet faltered when faced with random prompts?" I knew Hu Qianqian possessed a system, but the Emperor was oblivious. My words subtly hinted for him to investigate whether anyone around him had colluded with her. The Emperor, perceiving my intent, lightly tapped my forehead. "If you have anything to say, dear daughter, just speak plainly. Why play games with me?" Seizing the moment, I pouted. Pei Yi is ungrateful," repeatedly putting me in an awkward position while favoring Hu Qianqian. "I simply detest them." The Emperor chuckled, his white beard trembling with amusement. My words may not have been particularly clever, but they were just right for him. He was inherently suspicious, even towards his own children, maintaining a distant demeanor. Our relationship felt less like that of father and daughter, and more akin to sovereign and subject. Yet, as the youngest child and a princess, he revealed his affectionate side only in my presence. Seizing the favorable atmosphere, I nestled into the Emperor's embrace and inquired about the number of trustworthy shadow guards he could spare. The Emperor readily acquiesced. With an abundance of manpower at my disposal, I set out to investigate their true intentions. Qingru, a member of the protagonist group, had once garnered my affection due to the narrative's design. I leaked the rumors regarding her imprisonment. Before long, this seemingly innocuous move bore fruit. Pei Yi's personal guard, Zhang He, took a perilous risk to attempted jailbreak. only to be apprehended by my people. In Hu Qianqian's words, Qingru and Zhang, he formed a supporting couple. After Hu Qianqian's marriage, Qingru was to be paired with Zhang, he as his wife. With Zhang he captured, Pei Yi could no longer remain idle and came to demand his release. In my presence, Pei Yi perpetually maintained an air of composure. He raised his chin, calmly stating, "I kindly request Princess to hand over Zhang, he, and Qingru." This condescending demeanor suggested that his mere presence elevated the status of my princess's residence. I cast a sidelong glance at Ting Lan, who immediately understood. She reproached the doorman. "How can our princess's residence allow any riffraff to enter? Throw them out." Pei Ye's expression stiffened, anger flaring up within him, yet he ultimately inhaled deeply, coldly retorting, "According to the laws of Dezhou, I fear the princess lacks the authority to detain her subjects." Seeing him prepare to invoke the law, I smiled derisively. I had thought he was merely a vagabond. To my surprise, he is one of Master Pei's men. Does this imply that the Pei family disregards the law and brazenly attempts a jailbreak? Pei Yi was momentarily at a loss for words. I observed him with keen interest. In the dungeons, Zhang he insisted he was merely Qingru's lover, with no ties to Pei Yi, fearing to implicate him. Should he truly acknowledge Zhang, I could send him directly to the dungeons to join Zhang, he, and Qingru. At that juncture, I could subject him to rigorous interrogation, sparing me the trouble of further investigation. Pei Yi no longer regarded me with disdain, his eyes igniting with fury. Yet, as he gazed at me, something seemed to dawn on him, and his demeanor softened. After abstaining from Hu Qianqian's pastries, I began to shed weight. No longer was I the princess who gasped for breath after merely a few steps. I brought a Wu back to the princess's residence. She presented me with a cart full of garments, meticulously comparing each piece in front of the mirror and imparting knowledge of aesthetic principles. Under a Wu's guidance, I realized that Hu Qianqian's cool and aloof appearance suited simple colors, while the garments deemed gaudy and flashy were more befitting of me. Logically, as a princess, one would expect me to possess at least a modicum of aesthetic sense. However, my role was to serve as a stepping stone for Hu Qianqian, ensuring that her beauty was accentuated, akin to a delicate willow swaying in the wind. Now, standing before Pei Yi, I had transformed back into the initially radiant and healthy Princess Baohua. Pei Yi flashed a charming smile, convinced of his own allure, all evident in the arch of his brow. "Baohua, you need not pretend to be at odds with me. I know this is a ploy to entice me. A woman beautifies herself for the one she loves. Your efforts to become more beautiful are merely attempts to win me back." Although it had been some time since Pei Yi had smiled at me, this particular smile filled me with revulsion. Could it be that after I publicly humiliated him, he still believed I harbored feelings for him? My astonishment was misinterpreted as shyness. He fancied himself perceptive. "I understand that your animosity towards Hu Qianqian stems from your love for me." Pei Yi grew increasingly confident. "If only you were as yielding as Hu Qianqian, I might consider granting you a legitimate status. After all, what man does not have multiple wives and concubines?" I could scarcely believe my ears. The young man I had once cherished had devolved into such a character? Was this the consequence of the narrative's influence? A wave of dizziness washed over me, and I felt a surge of nausea. My expression evidently pained Pei Yi, prompting him to huff, "Zhang Baohua, I am offering you a way out. If you do not take it, this opportunity will vanish." I grasped Ting Lan's hand. "Let me have my guards drive him away." Pei Ye's temples throbbed with anger. "Who dares to touch me?" Within the princess's residence, the loyal supporters of the Pei and her families had long been ousted, and now my orders flowed smoothly. Soon clever servants fetched long sticks, delivering resounding blows to Pei Ye's rear. He barely had time to utter threats before fleeing in panic. After awakening from the absurdity Pei Yi had brought upon me, I regained my composure. Like Hu Qianqian, Pei Yi was equally disconcerting. His confidence had exceeded all bounds. Even if he firmly believed I still loved him, he should not have been so brazen. What hidden leverage did they possess that I was unaware of? At that moment, the shadow guards monitoring Hu Qianqian intercepted a secret letter detailing a list of over a dozen medicinal herbs. I summoned the imperial physician to examine the prescription, but they had never encountered such a concoction. We could only surmise. based on the abundance of ingredients aimed at soothing the lungs, alleviating coughs, and clearing heat and toxins. That this was a formula intended to suppress an epidemic. My eyelids twitched. An epidemic. I instructed the shadow guards to return the letter to its original location and to closely monitor market trends. Hua Qianqian was confined at home, and I needed to ascertain through whom she would procure medicinal herbs. Subsequently, I proceeded to the palace to pay my respects to Father Emperor. The dark guards had been assigned to me by Father Emperor. Naturally, what I knew was also within his grasp. Upon meeting Father Emperor, I refrained from bowing, instead adopting my usual demeanor of playful affection. However, Father Emperor's expression remained stern as he inquired, "Baohua, what do you intend to do?" Baohua was my title, and Father Emperor typically referred to me as Nan Nan, rarely employing such a formal address. Pretending not to recognize his admonition, I requested a ruthless official skilled in interrogation. Father Emperor scrutinized me for a moment before granting permission. The instructions I issued to the official were to pry open Qingru's lips, regardless of life or death. The azure skies stretched endlessly, yet beneath the tranquil lake surface, tumultuous currents surged. Many seemingly unrelated individuals were synchronously procuring the herbs listed in the secret correspondence. Some even began hoarding grain. No one engaged in bulk purchasing. Their actions were exceedingly discreet. Were it not for my meticulous monitoring of market trends, I might have mistakenly deemed this activity as ordinary procurement. They shared a common characteristic. All items, whether transported by water or land, via official roads or narrow paths, were directed toward Jiangnan. A foreboding sensation crept into my heart. Meanwhile, a torrential downpour besieged Jiangnan, relentless for 3 days and nights. Yet, the court remained unconcerned, for the dikes in Jiangnan had been reinforced just last year, rendering a breach unlikely. Coincidentally, many officials overseeing the waterways had connections to those procuring the herbs, either as disciples or close friends. Rain, rivers, dikes, plagues, grain. I felt I had unraveled the subsequent plot of this tale. Upon my next encounter with Father Emperor, I dispensed with my playful demeanor and instead performed the proper bow. He did not bid me to rise. I presented a memorial to him. After perusing it, Father Emperor threw the document against my forehead. I did not flinch or evade, allowing the memorial to strike me. The document clearly documented the deeds of Pei Yi and his faction. Their intention was to breach the dikes of Jiangnan and artificially induce a flood. They would collude with local wealthy merchants to destroy the embankments, inundate fields, and consolidate land, inciting discontent among the populace against the court. It was not difficult to surmise that they would portray the deluge as divine retribution, casting themselves as saviors. A war was on the brink of igniting. Father Emperor posed the same question once more. "Baohua, what do you wish to do?" I lowered my gaze. Previously, he had asked what I wished to accomplish. This time, he inquired what kind of person I aspired to be. If I desired to remain a sheltered child, blissfully ignorant of worldly affairs, I could not report these matters to the emperor. If I were to be prudent, I ought to inform the crown prince first, allowing him to report to Father Emperor. Yet, I did not trust the crown prince. During my investigation into the buyers, I discovered traces of the crown prince's involvement, coupled with the name Fengming Jiuxiao. I speculated that the crown prince might have struck a deal with Pei and Hua, only to find himself ultimately empty-handed. Ultimately, Pei would usurp the throne, and Hua Qianqian would ascend to power, aligning with the narrative tone of the first half of this novel. I knelt and answered with deliberate clarity. Baohua is the child of Father Emperor, a child capable of inheriting the throne, rather than merely a capricious Nan Nan. The founding emperor of the Great Zhou was a female sovereign, proving that women could indeed inherit the throne. In that moment, the warmth in Father Emperor's eyes vanished. I understood that the days of tender affection between us had come to an end. He had transformed entirely into a sovereign, exalted yet profoundly lonely. In the days that followed, Father Emperor feigned illness and confined me within the palace. The crown prince bribed the palace maidens, learning only that Father Emperor was ailing due to my actions and that I had fallen from favor. Days later, news of the dikes in Jiangnan breaching and the ensuing rebellion reached us, causing Father Emperor to faint from rage in the court. The imperial physician informed the crown prince that the emperor had only a day or two left to live. The crown prince mustered troops, not to quell the rebellion in Jiangnan but to besiege the Daming Palace where Father Emperor resided. He aimed to stage a coup. The crown prince never anticipated that the seemingly ailing father emperor would stand resolutely in the center of the hall clad in armor. There was no sign of a man on the brink of death. Realizing his plan had been exposed, the crown prince gazed at the emperor, a desolate smile gracing his lips. Father, I have sat in this position for 30 years. How could there be a crown prince for 30 years? It was akin to the final month before the imperial examination, yet he had endured for a full 30 years. The pressures of being unable to ascend or descend could drive a person to madness. Father Emperor's gaze remained cold, yet I could distinctly see his hands, clasped behind his back, trembling into fists. The crown prince was his firstborn, and in his youth, he had harbored the most beautiful hopes for his son. Yet as time passed, he grew fearful of the crown prince's inadequacies and equally fearful of his potential prowess. In this moment of utter defeat, the crown prince seemed to revert to the child of years past, clinging to his knees and calling out father. I recognized that this aged father, nearing the end of his days, was stirred by compassion. However, the present circumstances had forged a deadly enmity between the crown prince and me. If he did not perish, I would face endless repercussions. I removed all my hairpins, allowing my hair to cascade like a waterfall. Father Emperor's voice rang out sharply. Bahua, what do you truly wish to accomplish? I steeled my resolve and knelt at Father Emperor's feet. Father, I remove my hairpins to plead for forgiveness, solely to convey a message to the crown prince. Pei's faction has been entirely apprehended. Your reinforcements will not arrive. The crown prince's face momentarily reflected shock upon hearing this. Father Emperor's hawk-like gaze did not miss the fleeting expression on the crown prince's face. This was enough to reveal that the crown prince had merely sought to buy time, hoping to conspire with the rebels in Jiangnan. Having lost Father Emperor's final affection, the crown prince now found himself with no escape. Recognizing the futility of his situation, the crown prince drew his sword, its tip directed at me. Jiang Baohua, Pei has been your companion since childhood. For the sake of the throne, you have cast him aside. What difference is there between you and me? What right do you have to judge me? He was unwilling to accept this fate. After 3 decades as crown prince, he had ultimately been outmaneuvered by me. I understood the frustration of being a pawn in another's game, yet I felt no sympathy for him. I replied resolutely. It is precisely because I refuse to conspire with the remnants of the previous dynasty, nor will I sacrifice the lives of the common folk for my own desires. The crown prince's complexion drained of color. So, you are fully aware. All those involved, to varying degrees, had connections to officials of the former dynasty. Coupled with Zhang He's testimony, I ultimately pieced together the crucial link. Pei Yi was indeed a descendant of the former imperial family. The Pei family had submitted to the great Zhou solely to preserve their bloodline. My tragic fate stemmed from the fact that, as a princess of the great Zhou, I was inherently positioned in opposition to the protagonists. Pei Yi sought to restore his former glory, while the crown prince aspired to ascend the throne. They mutually exploited each other, viewing one another as stepping stones. Only the common folk of Jiangnan became the unwitting victims of this power struggle. The crown prince burst into laughter, placing the sword against his neck. Baohua, from this day forth, my wife and children will surely perish by your hand. Yet my grandson remains an infant, merely a blank slate. Father, he is also your own great-grandson. The crown prince took his own life, preserving his family's honor while redrawing a deeper chasm between me and Father Emperor with his blood. I vowed to treat the former crown prince's family with kindness. Father Emperor merely cast a profound glance my way, saying nothing. As I knelt on the ground, all I could see was the enduring silhouette of Father Emperor, who, unbeknownst to me, had stooped into the frailty of old age. Jiangnan did not rebel. The initial reports that reached the Eastern Palace were false. Under my watchful eye, Pei Yi was apprehended just as he prepared to head to Jiangnan. Pei Yi now bore a pallid visage, his once vibrant spirit extinguished. However, he revealed the faint smile that lingered in my memory. He poured out his heart to me. Baohua, the one I have always cherished the most is you. Yet, burdened with the mission of restoring our nation, I find myself unworthy of loving you any longer. I clapped my hands, and the attendants filed in, presenting the severed heads of his companions before him. Pei fell silent for a moment, then gently remarked, now that my mission has failed, I can finally be with you. Seeing the deepening affection in his eyes, I smiled with emotion. This time, I will finally grant you death. Pei's breath caught. Assuming I was testing him, he remained steadfast in his affection. Then grant me a cup of poison, so that I may love you in the next life. After speaking, he bowed deeply to me, as if bidding farewell. Very well, I nodded. I shall grant you that. Let it be a death of dismemberment. Pei looked up in shock. The mask of deep affection shattered before me. I coldly laughed. A dignified death? Even if I were to agree? The innocent people of Jiangnan, who nearly became victims of disaster, would never consent. With that, I turned and walked away, leaving Pei's words of regret in the past. When I went to see Hu Qianqian, she was gripping the wooden bars tightly, shouting loudly, "Let me out! I am the protagonist. I am the protagonist. You NPCs dare to treat me this way. You shall all face retribution." The jailer hurriedly bowed, attempting to prevent me from approaching Hu Qianqian. "Your Highness, the Hu family has long gone mad, spouting nonsense that may offend your ears." Ting Lan presented the princess's decree, instructing the jailer to step aside. I stood before Hu Qianqian. Although her hair was disheveled, she was surprisingly clean, with no dirt beneath her nails. And her meal did not resemble that of a condemned criminal. I scrutinized her carefully. "Have you truly lost your mind?" Upon hearing my voice, Hu Qianqian seemed startled. Shrinking into the corner, "No. Don't come near." Yet the moment our eyes met, I clearly saw the hatred in her gaze. As expected, a protagonist would not so easily succumb to madness. I ordered the jailer, who showed signs of sympathy, to be replaced by a ruthless interrogator to question Hu Qianqian. From that moment on, her fortune value plummeted to 0. Nothing could protect her any longer. This time, she found herself at her wit's end and under severe interrogation. She soon spilled everything she knew like beans. She came from another world, traversed into a book, and bound herself to a fortune system. As long as she garnered the favor of others, she could accumulate fortune points. These points not only bestowed upon her the halo of a protagonist, but also allowed her to exchange items from the system's marketplace. Fatally delicious pastries, a treasury of books, all produced by the system. I commanded the interrogator to extract every ounce of value from her. I sent an individuals unaware of the truth to accompany Hu Qianqian in a charade, deceiving fortune points to exchange for elixirs that could prolong my father's life. I instructed her to transcribe the contents I desired from the treasury. To prevent her from deceiving us, the interrogator would tirelessly verify her transcription, questioning her over and over again. The interrogator could rotate shifts, but Hu Qianqian could not. Soon, she realized that cooperation was her only path to survival. In Hu Qianqian's treasury, there existed countless cultural treasures from scholars, yet what I valued most were the foundational textbooks from her era. It was an educational system unlike ours, encompassing mathematics, physics, chemistry, and biology. I even encountered a type of bottom-up new thought that I had never dared to imagine. While I could not implement it, much like attempting to lift myself from the ground, I could utilize the techniques within to enhance the livelihoods of my subjects. I established an experimental field on the outskirts of the city, repeatedly testing the techniques learned from the treasury and subsequently promoting them nationwide. Innovations such as weaving machines, hybrid rice, and plowing technologies flourished across the land of the Great Zhou dynasty, enhancing productivity. The female emperor of the Great Zhou was rebellious. The founding emperor was the first female emperor in history. To realize the notion that cultivators should own land and weavers should have clothing, allowing the truly laboring populace to reap the fruits of increased productivity, I overturned the historically accepted policy of ignorance, encouraging the populace to pursue education and enlightenment. I did not wish to be a phoenix, singing alone in the sky. I desired to be the wind that blows across fertile fields. The seeds of hope sown today may ignite a great conflagration a century hence. Epilogue. A carriage rolled smoothly through fields ripe with golden wheat. The exterior of the carriage was unremarkable, yet inside was a different world. An elderly man, his hair white as snow, reclined against a soft cushion. Thick stacks of books piled on a low table before him. He casually opened a textbook titled Physics. The page read, "Law of inertia. An object will maintain its original state, either at rest or in uniform motion, unless acted upon by an external force." The servant could not comprehend the words on the page, yet felt the gentleness in the old man's gaze. The servant mused that since the day the female emperor ascended the throne, he had accompanied his master on journeys across the realm, and now, after 10 years, they found themselves in a small border town of the kingdom, able to obtain a complete set of foundational books for a negligible price. The female emperor had created the lightest sword in the world. He had spent his life pondering his master's intentions. How could he not discern his thoughts now? He spoke, his voice a bit sharp. "Master, shall we return home?" The old man's wrinkled hands brushed over the pages, as if caressing his daughter's hair. He softly murmured, "My dear." After 10 years of absence, he had witnessed his daughter surpassing her predecessors. The old man's voice was soft yet clear. "Indeed, we should return home." The end. Thank you for listening, and we shall meet again in the next story.